Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is the story of grace in my life. So when I was 8, I found out that the dad that I had been living with and thought was my dad, John, was not actually my biological father. My parents had gotten married and had my brother, and then 2 years later, my mother had an affair and got pregnant with me. And my mom was going to have an abortion. Her and my biological father had agreed that that would be the best thing in this situation. And my mother had gone to sleep and had the abortion scheduled for 9 o'clock the next day. And the Lord just continued to talk to her all night and convince her that that wasn't the thing to do. And she woke up and she told my dad, John, of everything that had happened. Of course, he was very hurt and wounded and broken, but he had told her not to have the abortion, that he would work things out and they could figure out what to do. And so as much as my dad took me in and accepted me as his, there was always I feel bitterness and distance there. So I always felt a separation between him. I felt like he was much closer to my brother. They would laugh and joke and play. But I felt like the relationship with me was so different. And so I always had this longing to know who my biological father was, to feel accepted and to feel loved, like truly loved by a dad. My dad, John, and my mother got divorced when I was in the 8th grade. And at that point, the only family that I knew was all of my dad's side. We didn't really know my mom's side of her family very much. And so he was from a big Italian family. So when my parents got divorced, I was no longer a part of that family. My brother went to go live with my dad, and he was still connected and in a relationship with our grandparents and our aunts and uncles and cousins, but I lost all of that. Losing my extended family was really hard. You know, as a kid, you don't think about it in terms of the bigger picture and understanding that it's just too hard or it's complicated. You just take it in as if it's you. There's something wrong with you. There's something broken, or there's something even too ugly about you that people would want to continue loving. So despite, the facts of the situation, I ended up taking it in as that was who I was. And as I continued to grow up feeling very disconnected from my family. I didn't have much to do with my brother either. My dad, John, that I had grown up with, we had probably gotten together maybe 2 times in the stretch of about 10 years. And he lived, 20 minutes from me, but, and I just had this longing to feel connected, to feel loved. So when I got married to Ola, my husband had really encouraged me to reach out to my dad, John, and to connect with him and to try to invite him to be a part of our lives. And I did, and it worked. And he started coming to Christmases and birthdays, and he was a part of our lives. And it was so exciting because I felt like this is what I had longed for so long, to feel like I had a dad. And at one point, he got very upset about something, that he felt like there was a conflict with my mother and him, and he just felt like I was in the middle of it. He decided that he was done. And so he said, from now until I decide again, let's not do this anymore. So we no longer had a relationship. It was over, it was done. And in my mind, the enemy really attacked me with that. He really reminded me that my biological father wanted to abort me, my mom wanted to abort me. He reminded me so many times that my biological dad held me in his arms and still walked away. And he would remind me that my dad, John, that I knew, that he knew me and didn't want me. I know that's a part of a lot of young women, especially, story where you don't have a dad, and all of a sudden you're doing things that you never in a million years would ever think that you would do, but just hungering for and having, that void filled in some way. My mom knew God, and I would, from the time I was little, I would hear her in the living room crying out to God on her knees, just giving her everything to him. And I learned from a young age that God is there. He's someone to believe in, to know that he really is there with you. And so as I grew older and came out of this completely lost place, I really got to know him. And every time I would come to church and I would worship, I would just, especially songs where I would hear him, we would be, singing about him as our Father and who he is and how he loves us. And I would always just have this hunger to really feel that and sense that and know that I know that beyond anything else. And so there became a point when God just gave me such peace the last time that I talked to my dad, John, years ago, where I just felt like, you know what, that's fine, God has me. And I just had peace after that. And I felt loved by God. And I spent a lot of time with young women in studies trying to sort out, like, does God really, really care? Like, he says he cares, but does he really care? And God would just send people around me to love on me. Then I met my husband, who was absolutely amazing, who made me for the first time really feel that really God loved me and that he really had a plan for me all of that time through all of the pain. Understanding his grace is something that is phenomenal. It's unexplainable. It's that thing that lets us lay down that guilt and that shame, and that trying to figure out who we really are, and really getting to the point of understanding that his sacrifice for us really does cover everything, every thought, everything that's been done against us and everything that we've done against other people. So I had searched for my biological father since as far back as I can remember. And so I searched for him, and always just thinking that maybe if I found him, he wouldn't really want to know me. Maybe he would just reject me, but always still wanting to know him. So last August, I got a letter in the mail, and it was from him saying that he knows God and that his desire would be to have a relationship with me, but if I didn't want to have one with him, that he completely understood, and he just wanted to just let me know that he cares. I called him about an hour later and talked with him on the phone, and it was so natural and so comfortable. We talked the same, just like from tangent to tangent to tangent. He told me that I have a sister, and that as far back as he can remember, he's always written on his calendar daughter's birthday. And it's because she's 13 years younger than I am, but we both have the same birth date. And so in September, my biological father came here, and I met him for the first time. And it was amazing. He is a Christian, and so he's at a place where he understands God's grace and mercy. And I think that makes it so much more beautiful, because we can kind of celebrate it rather than have bitterness. Oh my goodness, the first time he texted me, "Good morning, daughter," I just broke into tears. Because I wanted so long to be someone's daughter. I felt like one of the disciples walking and talking with Jesus for so long and knowing him. And then all of a sudden really understanding that he really does care about us, understanding that he really does have good plans for us. And even if I never knew my biological father, if I never met him, just the reality of God's love was completely overwhelming, and it still is. One of the most amazing parts of it is the other part with my dad that I had grown up with, my dad, John. We met in Panera, and I sat down with him and I said, "I really want to tell you something, and I know this is going to hurt." And I told him the whole story, and he was so great. He was so encouraging, and he was just telling me that, none of it was my fault. And then he apologized for not really showing me love, and not really spending a lot of time in a relationship with me because of everything that had happened. It was so hard for him. Ola had always told me, "Can you imagine what it would be like to be your dad, John, living with you, and every time he sees you, kind of remembering the history, remembering the betrayal and the bitterness and the hurt would come up." And he's like, "It's amazing that he took you in and acted that whole time as if you were his daughter. And he was okay with just accepting you and having you be his, and even saving your life, because he's the one who convinced your mom not to have an abortion." So even that part of the whole grace story is overwhelming. So my dad, John, wrote me a letter too, but that he's so glad that I'm his daughter, and that he's so glad that that I met my biological dad, and that he will support that relationship also in any way that he can, and that he is just sorry for the mistakes that he made and for the distance that was there. So it was all God's grace. All of it was God's grace.